Hi, I'm Lynn Christian, the founder of Soul Salt Inc. And I'm talking today with Dr. Chelsea Shields, who's going to talk to us about how to detect lies. I've found, and maybe you have too, that half truths can sound like facts. And in today's political climate, sometimes it's hard to know what is information and what is disinformation. And if you're like me, you don't want to be lied to. So I've invited Dr. Chelsea Shields to talk to us as an evolutionary anthropologist. She'll talk to us about why we are susceptible to being lied to, how that innate need for connection gets us in trouble sometimes. And she's also going to talk to us about trusting our feelings and our intuition because our gut instinct sometimes tells us something's off. There are other tools and other skills she'll give us, but jump in, listen to Dr. Chelsea, and see how you can learn how not to be lied to ever again.
Hi, I am Dr. Chelsea Shields, anthropologist, and I am a longtime fan and friend of Lynn Christian. So I'm here today to kind of teach you how to spot a lie or deception detection, as we call it in the field of evolutionary psychology and anthropology. So human brains have been hardwired for hundreds of thousands of years to be able to detect deception, lie, manipulation, fallacy, duplicity. And the reason for that is back in the day, the difference between being part of the group and kicked out of the group was life or death. If you trusted someone and you thought they were an ally and they were on your side and they actually weren't, the consequences were deadly. So we get these things that Lynn is an expert in called gut feelings. They're often imperceptible, hard to kind of codify and understand, but it just doesn't feel right. Now, she's an expert at that. So definitely trust her on all of that. I'm going to take it further to kind of what I do. So what I do is, well, can we read someone's behavioral cues or their facial expressions or the way that they're communicating? Are there any tells or, um, you know, like rules or patterns that we can look for in behavior to see if someone is being dishonest? Because if we fall for every lie, someone else is benefiting at the cost of our own self. So we don't want to fall for every lie. There's a reason our body doesn't feel good about being lied to. And there's a reason that we're angry when it happens. And it's because your body's way of telling you to really be careful who you trust. So the main thing to know, and there's no help here. I know there's lots of, so like faux science out there that's like if someone looks to the left or, if they, what are some other ones? I can't remember some, but anyway, there's lots of faux science out there. But I have to tell you, the reality is it's very, very hard to tell if a stranger is lying. That's one of the reasons we have ingrained xenophobia in our cultures and in even our biology at times throughout history. And even today we see it where we are afraid of what is unknown, what is different, what is other. And one of the reasons, not the whole reason, but one of the reasons is because we don't know their tells. We can't tell if they're being honest or if they're being deceptive. And so we fear it and we kind of think of it as bad or negative because we can't really figure it out. Whereas someone in our own culture, it's easier for us to tell who's being honest and who's being a liar or a hypocrite, right? So that's one of the reasons we're fearful of other, because we can't really tell. And that's just the fact. It's hard to tell with strangers, but it's a lot easier to tell with people you know. So that's kind of the advice I'm going to give today. You can look out for these patterns even in strangers, but here's what's really going to help you in your day-to-day life to figure out if someone's lying. So the first two are pretty quick, and the last one takes some time to figure out. So the first one is that the main rule in spotting deception is to look for changes in someone's baseline. So that's the quickest way, is if someone normally speaks one way and has one kind of speed and one tone, and then all of a sudden it changes. that's when we know there's something going on here, because you can't hide your biology. When your nervous system is flooded with cortisol, your heart beats faster, your blood's pumping, you end up speaking faster because you're matching your heartbeat, right? Even if you don't intend to. So it's very hard for the casual liar. I'm not talking about like psychopaths or sociopaths here, because they don't experience empathy the same way. They don't experience social pressure the same way. So their cortisol may or may not be raised. Raise. But if we're talking about the average person or the casual liar, when you're telling a lie, you get stressed. And stress is something that leaks out of your body in the way that you move, in the way that you communicate, in the way that you express, in the way that you speak. So we're really looking for those leaks of nervous energy and seeing how that changes from when they're telling the truth. Okay. So what we really want to do is ask 2 or 3 questions that are very mundane. Hey, how did that project go today? Oh, awesome. Oh, I saw you went out to lunch here. Was it good? How was the food? And you're looking for their baseline cues, which I'll tell you in just a second. And then you ask the question you really want to ask to see if they're lying. And you see if those baseline cues change. And the more they change, the more likely the person is telling a lie. So here are just a handful of kind of cues you can be looking at. So the first one is the tone of their voice. Do they normally speak with a low tone like this? And then all of a sudden they're talking with a higher tone and they're explaining things way up here. That is a sign. Liars often speak in questions. Yeah, I went to lunch with Tommy. I was there until 5. I lost my coat at the laundromat. They go up on the end of their sentences, almost like when they're asking a question, looking for approval. They're trying to see if their answer is going to be received. And so if all of a sudden someone goes into the high tones, especially if they start talking in what we call a question ending on a high tone, that may be a sign that they're lying. The next one is speed. Like I said, your heart beats about 3 times faster when you're speaking on a stage, or when you're caught in a lie, or when you are doing something with a lot of social pressure. And because of that, you end up talking faster. I tell all of my TED speakers this. You almost have to slow down 3 times, because that's how fast your heart is beating, and you'll actually sound normal to the crowd because their hearts aren't beating that fast. They're not under social pressure. So that's what you really want to look out for, is speed. If I'm talking like this, the restaurant was great, the steak was so great, and then all of a sudden, I didn't go out to eat with Tanya. Right? As soon as I speed up, now we're seeing a sign. Okay. So if it's faster, there's a couple reasons for that. One, they want to escape. There's a desire to get out of the conversation. So I'm going to talk really fast so that I can get out of it. Another one is a reason to kind of confuse you with too much information. Well, we parked here, we went here, we did this, every little detail. Then I'm going to overwhelm you with lots of little facts so you won't notice the few that are out of place. Another thing is just this idea of giving you, talking so fast that you don't have a chance to buffer or counter or rebuttal. So that's the reason speed is really important, and always look out for that speed. The next one is facial expressions. So when we're really excited, you can tell in your face. When we're really sad, you can tell in your face, right? But when someone's lying, you can't tell above the nose, right? So they'll smile. They'll be sad. But we're not seeing that same change in the cheeks being high when they're happy, or the eyebrows being extremely concerned, with the wrinkles when they're sad. So if you're speaking to someone and the upper half of their face is not really making expressions, the reality is whatever they're saying is probably not true or fully accurate. So when someone's really feeling an emotion, the entire face matches that emotion. So look out for expressions as well. Another thing with expressions is lips. Okay, so when someone doesn't want to speak, pursed lips, closed lips, touching chin, trying to keep the lips closed. So anytime someone's really making weird expressions with their lips or trying to keep them closed, they're trying to hold back information. Remember that energy that's leaking out, they're trying to hold it back. So look out for that. The next one is body language. So when we're confident, we're willing to be what's called vulnerable. So the most vulnerable places on the human body are the neck, right? The stomach, the genitals, the legs. So when someone keeps this whole core open, we think that they're comfortable, that they're calm, and that means they're not having a lot of cortisol in their body, right? And that they're not feeling a ton of social pressure or rejection or fear. So keep an eye out for that. If you're talking to someone and they're hiding their neck, their chest, their stomach, their genitals, they're closing their legs, they're keeping their legs crossed, right? If they're really kind of closing all of their most vulnerable parts, then they're hiding something. And it might just be fear, right? I wouldn't say that everyone that is closed is lying, because a lot of people do that as a protection or defensive mechanism. But if you're seeing that in accordance with everything else and they're not normally like that, then that's a big sign to look out for. The next one is blink rate. And this one's pretty common and standard across the scientific literature, that when people are lying, they blink faster and they blink more often. So keep a rate for that when you're looking at those mundane questions. See how often they blink. It's not actually that often when we're not thinking about it. But when we're lying, we tend to blink a lot more. Okay, so that's a sign. And it looks a little unnatural. Same with eye contact. That's the last one I'm going to give you, which is about, liars don't often look you in the eye and maintain those normal facial expressions as they're telling a lie. That's very advanced lying. So liars will kind of look to the sides. They'll avert their eyes. They will look above you or below you. They don't make that sustained, intimate eye contact because they don't want to get caught. And they know if they really look at you, they feel those emotions, they see your emotions, they might express something that they don't want to express. So, if their eye contact has changed, definitely pay attention to that. So your goal in kind of spotting deception is to figure out someone's baseline and then really keep an eye out for their tone, their speed, their expressions, their body language, their blink rate, and their eye contact when they are telling you the lie, or what you suspect as the lie. The next thing to keep an eye out for, again, this one's a quick one. Number 2 is when something very logical or simple sparks a quick or immediate emotional reaction. So that is very, very common and a very common pattern throughout anyone who's trying to manipulate, not just lie, but like get their way or manipulate a situation, because most people feel like to avoid conflict. So the second something gets highly emotional, they're more likely to give in or give up the power or say, oh, you're right, or they just don't want to cause conflict. So something that's very simple that becomes highly emotional or hot, all of a sudden, that's a tactic. It's a big sign. So keep your eyes out for that. So, consciously or not, manipulators use this kind of tactic to kind of confuse and overwhelm you. So here's some of the things you want to look out for. Aggression, defensiveness, deeply too much information, personal information, way too quick, or in an awkward place in the conversation, or an awkward place because of your professional relationship, defensiveness, kind of chaotic energy where it's just like all over the place. Anything that's attacking or blame or shame or guilt meant to make you feel an emotion. Anything that's just distraction, like we're talking about one thing and now we're on this other tangent and we're being distracted, over explaining. So keep in mind for that. That's kind of the second way you can tell that someone is probably being deceptive or manipulative, is when they take a very simple concept or conversation and it becomes heated and emotional quickly. Liars often can't be what's called calm and comfortable. Like I said, that open body language, speaking slowly, speaking low, and being able to take a minute to think and reply in a calm way. Again, psychopaths can, but the casual liar can't. So when it gets heated, when it gets emotional, when the energy gets up, that's that nervous energy again. And often, to avoid having a straightforward conversation, they'll use confusion to overwhelm your senses. And now you're feeling the conflict and you just want to avoid. And so they can kind of get out of it for that moment. The third and final one is much simpler, but it takes a long time. It's not a quick strategy. And you've heard it a million times, but the reason it sustains is because it is real and it works. And it's, do their actions match their words? I know that's so simple, but over time, that is the biggest way to tell if someone is being deceptive or lying. So really pay attention to hypocrisy. So, fighting one way in one context and then fighting another way in a different context. That person is out of line. They're trying to get social approval or social capital in each setting. So they're not being fully honest. Another thing is when they say one thing and then they do something else, right? And you can see that. It's obvious to you. Or another thing people do, and this is often more institutionalized, like leaders, for example, but they say, hey, everyone has to follow these rules, but they themselves don't follow those rules. So when you see that level of hypocrisy over time, that's a big sign that there's some deception there. And remember, anytime you're being deceived, someone is benefiting at the cost of yourself. So pay attention to these. I hope it's helped you. And Lynn, I can't say enough that she is such a good expert at that gut feeling. And that's really the first sign. So never underestimate that as well. You have ancient biology and neurochemistry that's designed for you to be able to perceive those things in a way that you can't even cognitively comprehend. And that's real. So thank you. I hope this helped.
Now that Chelsea has enlightened us about how not to be lied to again, I'm hoping that you can again trust some of your instincts when something feels a little bit off and not blame yourself if you have been lied to. Take to heart this information, and right now, before you leave this recording, write down one thing you want to do to keep yourself from being lied to in the future. Best wishes.